So let's start our next community call and Ask Me Anything session. This week, the topic that we want to start with is the latest statistics that we have on BrightID. Uh, it was an interesting topic personally for me because we have started this journey for almost a year now uh, with Adam, Philip, the co-founders, and Maddie. And after almost 3 years now, and especially because Gitcoin round 10 is now over, we can have a conversation about the latest numbers. How many users do we have? How many people have uh, downloaded BrightID on their phones? How many applications are integrated with BrightID? Which application has the most users on BrightID? And questions like that, I think, is interesting not only to our guests here, but also ourselves to have the clear view of where we are right now and how much have we moved forward in our journey in the last 3 years. That's why I suggested this topic. Numbers, of course, are always boring somehow, but I think the questions that people would have in their mind would make it more interesting. And if we find it too boring, we're going to move forward to another topic. I'm going to start with the first question myself. And I think Adam would know the best. How many verified BrightID users do we have currently?
Let's see if anyone else here knows how to answer that question, because that is available to be
It's
found. So
publicly
I think
available.
I think by trying to find out where to find that
Hmm.
statistic, we may learn something about what tools there are for like viewing the BrightID graph, or viewing other things about BrightID. So let's see what tools we can find. Let's see if anyone knows the answer to that. So yeah, sir. So Sergey just posted explorer.brightid.org. I think that's a great tool. If you haven't tried it, we've talked about it in previous AMAs, but I'll show you something. So you can just go to that. He shared the link. It's explorer.brightid.org. Anyone can just go to that, and you can see some statistics. But if you really want to see kind of like a personalized view of the graph, what you should do is, Postlar saying he sent me a direct message that he probably didn't want me to say to everybody. He says numbers are showing 0 for me.
Maybe
Anyway,
there's a
I'll check it out,
bug,
but
yeah.
I'm going to show you how you can kind of personalize your view of the graph. So if you look in the right menu of BrightID, you can there's something called Explorer code, and that's for using the Explorer. So you can go in there and you can copy your Explorer code, and I'm not going to show you what mine is, but there's an Explorer code. You copy it in, and then it'll also ask you for your backup password, because there's a password that encrypts your names and photos that you have stored with BrightID. So you can uh, upload and then download to the cloud, which basically BrightID provides a cloud service to store that encrypted data for you. You can download it and then decrypt it with that password. And then it'll put little dots, or put little faces in your Explorer. So does anyone want to share their screen and show? Postler said the Explorer wasn't working, so maybe we won't be able to see anything, but does
Yeah.
anyone else see that it's working, and can anyone else put in their own Explorer code and is willing to show us like what that looks like? I don't think that in the video it's gonna share too much. I don't know, maybe. I'm trying to think, like, we don't want, like, one of the main features of BrightID, and the reason why when you look at the graph by default there are no faces on it, is because we're trying to allow people to protect their own privacy. And so maybe on a public YouTube video, we don't want to actually share someone's version of the graph, but you know, I wouldn't mind doing it myself. I know that there's also going to be some, like, I don't know. I guess out of respect for the people that I'm connected to, because like I don't care if people know which dot I am on the BrightID chain,
Hmm.
but maybe some of the people that I've connected to do care about that. So out of respect, I probably won't share my screen.
Maybe we could
But I would say
share
try
a
it
screen
yourself.
without logging in, just to show the statistics
Sure.
part. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So does
but
explore.brightid work or does it not right now?
it took some time for me, but now it's loaded. I
Oh,
can
it
share
probably
my
takes a
screen.
long time for you because you have
Ah,
like an insane number of connections. Um, but yeah, feel free to share your screen.
let me share my screen here, and now you can see. Here's the explorer.brightid.org, which shows you the graph. It might take a bit of time, and I know that Maddie and Mohsen are working on improving the speed of this to like show up more smooth and faster. For me personally, it took a long time to load, but right now I have it. And on the top left corner, you have the menu. And what Adam was talking about is here. You can type in
Well,
or copy and
show
paste
people that.
your Bright ID.
Oh, well, you
What do
can't
we
see the
call
end
it?
of it, but I would be very careful because this
Mm,
video is being shared. So you know,
yeah, people would
obviously they
see
can't
it.
see your password, so they're not going to be able to decrypt that. But let's just be careful when we're showing these statistics not to show anything that could be used to, I don't know, um, decrypt or like de-anonymize people or decrypt parts of the graph. So yeah,
Yes.
we want to preserve people's privacy as much as possible. So like in I don't know, in a smaller setting, it's probably okay, but I just want to be very careful of that.
So in the and I just wanna say that I have not logged in, and
Yeah.
when people haven't logged in, they don't see any information regarding every single node in this graph, which
Yep.
is basically representing the user that is making connections to others. And they just see a bunch of nodes or the users that are making connections to others. And you can see the based on different colors the type of connection that they have with each other. Like, is this a seed making a connection, a verified user, a not verified user? And then the links can be a recovery connection or someone that they know or someone that they just met in a connection party or somewhere just for the sake of bright id, or they have reported each other as a like a the attacker as someone who's trying to create a duplicate account, someone who's reported as a diseased person. So it's all color coded. But as you can see, there's no faces to them. There's no information about these nodes. But as soon as you log in,
Right.
then you're going to see the pictures and the faces of people that you have a connection to, only those
Right.
people.
Yeah.
Uh,
What you're seeing now, these anonymized computer readable numbers, this is all public information. Anyone can see this part of the graph. When it starts being overlaid with some personally identifiable information, that's done on a personal basis. So it uses your own list of names and photos and overlays them on that view. So you know, I would say just out of respect, don't dox your friends on BrightID. That's just not respectful. If someone wants to dox themselves, I guess they can, but like don't dox other people. And we, you know, we bright ID like we're privacy first. Privacy is a huge priority. And so there's no guarantees about anonymity. Like you could take a graph like this and with some sleuthing and maybe overlaying it and comparing it with other social graphs and using some known points and stuff like that, you could probably deduce who some of the people are, even if they didn't want to be de-anonymized. But having said that, we respect people's privacy as much as possible, and we take exactly the opposite approach of Facebook, where it's like, oh, by default, we're just going to share practically everything with anyone. That's like the exact opposite. It's like by default, you share nothing with anyone. And someone in the chat asked about apps. So we're also very protective with apps. Apps do not see your BrightIDs. They can query about you using another identifier, like an intermediate identifier, to protect your to protect you from those apps from sharing more than you want to share. Like that, like app A should not know that you're using app B, for instance. So we do that by using intermediate identifiers, and we're rolling out blind signatures to so that, because right now there is a mapping between intermediate identifiers stored on the nodes. When we roll out blind signatures, there will be no mapping. So no possible way other than like obscure attacks like timing attacks or something like that to figure out who's using an app, like linking app users together in some way or something like that. So let's go to the, yeah, exactly. Click on the BrightID, because someone was at, where it says BrightID and there's that drop down in the
Here,
middle.
okay.
Yes, exactly. And someone was asking about like different applications and what data might be in here for the different applications. So what happens if we click on one of those?
Let's go on and click on rank 1 plus.
Sure. So now
I
we
just
might
clicked
see
on
some,
it.
okay, so now it filters the graph.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try one that is a community or an app.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's different ranks in BrightID, like different types of verification levels.
How about
Although I
seed
will say that,
connected or
yeah, let's not do one of those. Let's do an actual app. So I will say that, or a community, either an app or a community.
mm-hmm.
So I will say that right now, one of the challenges that we're struggling with in BrightID is how do we use a stronger connection level and still have like a set of steps? Because right now we have a set of steps that anyone can follow to get like a very basic verification level on BrightID. And we have more difficult verification levels, but we don't have a set of steps that says follow these steps and you'll probably get verified with this other higher verification level. So that's something we're working on, just so you guys know. So yeah, here's ClearFund. Here's an application and a community. It's kind of both. And so you can, if you go like on the other side, it'll tell you that there's some seed members, there's some users connected to the seed group. So I would say that this community is not very active. Let's look at another community, one that I know is active. Let's look at DAO Square, if you can find that one. That's a very active community.
Yes.
And let's see, yeah, let's look at DAO Square and see what they're up to. So yeah, they've got 1,500 users connected to their community. So that's a very big community. A lot of people are being verified through DAO Square, so that's great. Yeah, and so these seeds in the graph are very helpful because they help us to have like pre-trusted regions. So if someone was at home, like trying to create a bunch of Sybils in the graph, they could make a structure that looks identical to this structure, except they wouldn't have these very important seed points in there, these seed groups, these points of pre-selected trust. So there's a process for adding those into the graph. That doesn't mean that everyone that connects to a seed will necessarily be verified under all the different verification levels. But what it means is it's a way to break that symmetry. If there's an attack and a large Sybil region, it's very unlikely that they'll be able to have the same number of seeds. So the graph analysis can easily say like, okay, this big region over here is unknown. Either like it's a bunch of legitimate people that just haven't figured out how to connect to seeds yet, or it's a Sybil region. This one over here, these people have connected to seed groups, seed communities. So that's part of the honest region of the graph. So yeah, there's statistics on seeds. Can you type something into your bar at the top where it says explore.brightid.org? I don't think there's a link to this, but this is kind of like a hidden statistics thing
Okay.
that
Oh,
people can know about if you do /seeds. Just type in /seeds. And there's kind of like, you can drill down even further into the seed groups and see what they're up to. So you can like see how many people are connecting and becoming verified through the different seeds. So this is important. It's important we have a seed DAO that is comprised of different members of the different seed communities, and they vote together to elect new seed groups. That's the method that we're using now. There may be other methods to select seed groups in the future, but so far it's like, it's maybe not as decentralized as we wish, but it does have members of different seed communities in it, and then they vote to add new seed groups. And there's kind of this auditing that goes on where you want to make sure every seed group has a quota, like a number of users that it can bring in, and you just want to make sure that the seed is doing kind of what you expect, that they're bringing in the number of verified users that you would expect given the community size and their reach, etc. So so this is something where you can kind of drill down into that. And if there's something that looks suspicious, then the seed DAO can vote to lower the quota or revoke a seed group altogether. So that's how seeds are being formed now. We've had other AMA discussions about how we might create seed groups. We definitely want it to be like a scalable process. So right now it doesn't feel very scalable. It feels like there's one seed DAO that has to review everything, and we want to figure out some way where we can add these communities. Ideally, because right now I feel like most people, when they go to get verified, they come and connect to a seed community that they really don't know that well. Like maybe they just met it because it's the app that they want to like get verified for, but they don't really have a history with those people. And or I guess even worse, they come to a BrightID connection party as their way to get verified, and they just don't know anybody. Usually that's the case for most people. Like you show up and you just don't know anybody, but you still manage to get verified. So that's not the ideal. What we're looking for with BrightID is we really want there to be enough seed communities and enough opportunities to get verified that you connect to someone that you already have a history with. For example, I don't know if Vitalik's going to watch this, but he showed up to one of the connection parties late to the middle, and he's like, what is this?
what
Like,
is going on?
it's like, what is going on? Like, I don't know anyone. This is not what I thought was going to happen. Like, okay, I'm out of here. And that's it. Like,
Yes.
that's a pretty normal reaction. It's like, like, I don't know these people. I don't want to connect to anybody. Then later on, we had a video call, and we made a connection, and that's like, the way it should work. And I happened to be in a seed group, so he was able to get verified that way. But that's like, those more natural connections is what we want. So we want you to be able to find a community that you already have a connection to. And so you should already know and have a history with some of the people, and that's ideal. So we need to do a lot. We have a lot of work to do. We need to expand the communities so that everyone can look at the list instead of just seeing, like right now on the seed list, it just says, okay, here's your language and here's your time, come join a connection party. You're not going to know anybody. Really, ideally, we want to have things that are like more find it like more granular in the regions, more granular in the interests, so that you can say, okay, I want to join like the Shenzhen Poker Club connection party or something like that. And maybe you already know some people in there and like you've known them for years. That's the best. And then so people are making higher level connections. And then once that's the norm, then we can start using these higher level verifications and we can say, okay, these are the steps. Like find a community near you where you already have some history with that community. Like you know someone, or maybe you can go with someone that knows someone or something like that. You have like some real connection there. And that's how people should get verified for BrightID. So we have a lot of work to do. But as you can see from the seeds, we do have quite a few seed groups, but we need to find a scalable way to have, I mean, probably millions of seed groups, honestly, or something along the line. Like you find something local enough. I mean, really, it's going to be millions of seed groups or something, some trusted like community thing. Um, like for me, I prefer smaller, more intimate things, but there's also the potential of something like, I don't know, a larger thing. Like let's say we've talked before about instead of using seed groups, we could import trust. So add those little seed dots to the graph by going through a process that involves like a trusted agency. So let's say you anonymously import your e-passport and that becomes a little boost to your, like it can become an individualized point of trust that you went through that action. So there's other ways to seed trust, but if we can make it work, I kind of like the community idea, this community idea, if there's a way to make it scalable. If not, we might have to fall back on these kind of larger, more like agency, like trusted agency specific to import trust. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's kind of where we are with the seed groups right now. Let's see, what other statistics should we head over to apps.brightid.org and check out some stats there, see what's going on with the apps. Apps.brightid.org. Yep. .brightid.org. There you go. That should do it. So we can see what's been happening with the latest Gitcoin round. A lot of people found out about the trust bonus this last round. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can kind of see this. I think most of the growth recently in the last month was driven by Gitcoin, the latest Gitcoin round. If you scroll down to the very bottom, you can see some graphs that show the overall growth. Keep going. There you go. So sponsored users went up in the last month from like if I'm reading it right, from like 16,000 to 24,000, which is huge. That's like 50% jump. And I think most of that was driven by the latest Gitcoin grants round. I guess what does it mean for a user to be sponsored? Some people may not know that. So when you join the BrightID graph, when you use BrightID, because it's a public good, a sponsorship is a recognition that you've received the value of that public good. And we give the opportunity to apps to pay like a small amount. It should never be a barrier for entry for an app or a person to join, to kind of signal to the network that they brought someone in. They brought in this user. They sponsored them. They're paying a portion of the value of this public good on their behalf. The rest is kind of just like there for the just left on the table for the users in the apps to enjoy the benefit of BrightID. But there is a small fee that's collected and used for to pay for the public good, pay for things like development, research, building better anti-Sybil algorithms, figuring out what we're going to do with seed DAOs and seed communities, stuff like that, how to scale the network, trying to solve all these problems so that it goes to pay for that public good. And and if we so BrightID is nonprofit, we optimize for the number of users. We don't want anyone to be excluded from BrightID. So because we optimize for the number of users, if they're and not for profit, if there's excess revenue, we have an arrangement with a US-based nonprofit called Hedge for Humanity that has a mission to distribute value to all of humanity. Humanity would get a refund. So basically, if there's excess revenue, because maybe like the sponsorship price is like a little higher than it needs to be to support all the goals of BrightID, then there would be a refund, and it would get sent back to every BrightID verified person as a dividend. So not only are you getting like cool stuff from being part of BrightID, and you're already maybe getting some dividends from some of these apps, there's potential for another dividend there. So anyways, that's what sponsored means. And then there's also verified users, which you saw. So more users get sponsored than verified because it's kind of like this funnel process. Not everyone completes the verification process. So an app may say, hey, you're good to go. Like, go ahead and get verified. We're going to sponsor you. And they actually pay for that sponsorship. And then the person doesn't follow through, or they may be a Sybil attacker. We definitely don't want apps to have to overpay for like to sponsor Sybil attackers. So we leave it up to the apps to determine at what point in the process they want to sponsor users. Like they could say, hey, you got to go through these steps first before we're even going to sponsor you. But I think most, just because it's so cheap and because we haven't seen any like massive problems with like sponsor griefing, I guess you could say, then we like usually it's very early on in the process, like right when you register, you get sponsored type of thing. It happens behind the scenes. Most users don't even know that they're getting sponsored, and it just happens. You could sponsor yourself as well. That option is there, but apps do it for you, so that's the typical way. So let's just look at some of the apps and see how they're doing, I guess. I mean, since we're here, might as well. There's like 12 apps or 11 apps or something. So let's look at the top ones. One Hive. So Celeste, there used to be a faucet. I think that faucet may be decommissioned now. But a lot of users came in to collect some free honey. Now they use it for Celeste, and it's pretty cool because Celeste is a dispute resolution framework, kind of like a jury system almost. So if you, let's say that your DAO has a charter, and someone creates a vote for your DAO that goes against the charter, and you want to dispute that vote should even exist, then you can raise the dispute to Celeste, which is this One Hive dispute resolution framework. And then they will, like, people will be selected for the jury. They'll look at your charter and they'll say, yes, this actually does follow the charter. No, this doesn't. And they'll make a ruling on it for you. And the jurors earn a fee. So if this sounds like something that's interesting to you, I would definitely go check out One Hive Celeste and maybe sign up to be a juror. There's not a ton of, actually, there's not really any disputes right now, but they're just to like keep you interested. They're just paying a dividend to everybody who even signs up to be part of Celeste. So go check that out. And but it's a really cool concept, and I hope more DAOs will use it. I think that there's at least one really cool DAO. Actually, I think there's 5 or 6 really cool DAOs coming out for One Hive that will be taking advantage of Celeste. So that's One Hive. Gitcoin, I think we all know what Gitcoin is, but Gitcoin is going to make it so that anyone who wants to can work for the open internet, get paid through DAOs, and fund public goods like BrightID itself. So Gitcoin plus BrightID is like a match made in heaven. It's pretty awesome. They're doing great. They're doing amazing. So we're happy to help them in any way. Figment Learn is pretty awesome. It's a way that you can get paid to show that you know stuff about, especially if you have skills. that you've learned, you've gone through some learning courses and learned how to contribute to a DAO or an ecosystem or a project. If you can show that you've educated yourself about it, you can earn money. And of course, BrightID helps there because we want to stop people who like clone. We want to stop someone from like learning the materials and then cloning themselves 1,000 times and just collecting the reward for the material that they learned one time. So yeah, we want unique humans there. Yes,
Uh,
Pascal.
Before we go forward with the other apps that are using BrightID, and I saw someone asking this question, and I know that people are fixating on these numbers.
Oh yeah, that's
Uh,
second.
I think it's a good idea to talk about these titles that we have. We have assigned, we have used, and then verified users.
Yeah,
And then we can see that they're like almost all of them that I'm seeing here, except for Rabbit Hole, the number of used is always more than verified users. What does that mean when we say, okay, 8,742 used
yeah. So
sponsorships?
yeah, this is just talking about sponsorships. So assigned is how many sponsorships they have available to spend on new users. Used is how many of those they've already used up. And then verified users is how many verified users are using the app. So that may or may not be connected to the sponsorships because
Hmm.
the verified users could have gotten sponsored for a different app because a sponsorship is something that happens once in your lifetime. Just one app needs to sponsor you. So let's say someone got sponsored on Gitcoin and then went over to Figment Learn and linked their BrightID there, then they would still show up under verified users there, but they would only show up as a used sponsorship under Gitcoin. So that's how you can have more verified users and sponsorships. And if you go down to the very bottom, let's scroll down to the Discord unique bot because that's a cool. So if you want to take advantage of BrightID and you want to like um I don't know, have a one person one vote in your Discord server, or you want to like enforce permanent bans, then you can install the Discord unique bot and it'll assign a role to anyone that links their BrightID. So it's like the lowest barrier to um integrating BrightID is just add it to your server. And several like token projects with tokens have done that. They've added that to their BrightID. So that's pretty cool. But you'll notice that they have zero sign, zero use. The thing is, we have not yet figured out like a good way to have the Discord unique bot use sponsorships because it's used on so many different servers that we just don't do it. But what that practically means is that for a user, you've got to use some other app in the BrightID ecosystem. You go use some other app, then you'll be sponsored, and then you can go get verified for the Discord unique bot. So it's not ideal, but that's how that works, and that's why they have zero and why they're at the bottom. But I think you can kind of understand how someone can go get sponsored at one app and then come back and be verified for another app, and that's why the numbers are what they are.
I think that's a signal that uh, potentially applications can use BrightID and have their users get verified on BrightID and start using them practically for free because they can do some like it's a kind of indirect advertisement for other applications,
Yep,
but I
exactly.
can integrate with BrightID and not even consider sponsorships and pay money for sponsorships,
Yep,
but just call my users and say, okay, go use this other applications, and there's a list of like 11, 12 applications and this page, go use one of them and learn about them, get sponsored by them, come back and use my application.
yep, you can totally do that. Or you could form a partnership with some other app and say, like, go here first, sign up for
Hmm.
this app, come back here, however you want to do it. Yeah, there should never be a barrier for either an app or a user to get sponsored, but there still should be an appealing way to pay for this public good. So that's how the sponsorships work. Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly run through the next ones. Rabbit Hole's another learn to learn to earn type application, discover crypto applications and earn tokens. So it's kind of fun. You get to discover new crypto applications and then earn some coins. Rare coin claims is like you can check them out and figure out why they have a unique token issuance model and why they're cool and get some free rare coin. Same with ED, so ID chain. We've talked about ID chain before. Really cool. I hope that there's some like more developments in the future with ID chain. It should be a platform for UBIs and also DAOs, like one person, one vote. So a blockchain that is like very cheap to use and pays you a dividend for using it. So I think right now the dividend is worth about $1. I think rare coin claims dividend is also worth about $1. So like these are small, but that's kind of where we're at with BrightID with our verification level. We want to get to the point where you could get a full UBI, like a real UBI, where you could actually sustain your cost of living from receiving a bunch of different dividends through BrightID. That's where we want to get. But we need to get to these higher verification levels for that to work. Right now, like people are only willing to put up like about $1 worth of value because our verification level is really low. Once people start like bringing in friends and family, making recovery connections, achieving the higher levels, we'll start to see some of these like bigger ones where it's like, okay, here's one that's going to give you $100 worth of value, but you have to have like made some connections to people that you really know have a history with to get that one. So Clear Fund is like really a cool one. It's it's like a more decentralized, more anonymized, possibly more collusion resistant, because it uses BrightID and something called Macy that was like the brainchild of Vitalik and some other people, to prevent collusion attacks on quadratic voting, quadratic funding. So, anyways, that's Clear Fund. So it's like, imagine if you had a Git coin that didn't require you to sign up for GitHub, and that you could just like spin up multiple instances of it for whatever case you want. That's Clear Fund. The Ether is like a cool project, but I wonder if, I hope it's not dead, but it was, maybe still is a cool project where you get to like state an opinion on something. It's like kind of souped up polling. What was that? There's like some Web 2 thing that's like really kind of similar to it that it reminded me of, where it's like you get to take one side, someone else takes one side, and then you can have like these subtopics, and you can like vote and resolve a dispute by like staking something. So I guess what they do differently is they allow you to stake something, and the other one didn't, because it's like this is connected to blockchain, so you can use crypto. Are the ones on the bottom even working? I don't even know if the last two even work. But scroll down just in case, because they might work. Oh yeah, burn
Burn.
signal, I think, is one of those ones where it's like gas. It was cool when it started, but now it doesn't work because
Yes.
gas is so expensive, it's like unusable now. But it was the same type of thing where you can like burn some ETH and then like state an opinion on something, but the gas cost is so expensive now. Top up gifter, that's like
I
some
know about Top Up
Iranian thing.
Gifter.
That for Iranians.
I think it only supports. So what it does is it gives each unique user a top up for like networks available in their home country.
Oh, okay.
It started with Iran. I don't know if other countries are included or not, but it can potentially They provide top-ups for free for users in different countries as well, but I don't know the progress on that. But yeah, that's the purpose of top-up gifter. It's kind of a UB Universal Basic Top-up program instead of Universal Basic Income. That's what top-up gifter is. It gives free top-ups to people,
Yeah.
and it's a Telegram bot. Yeah.
Okay. And there's probably, so there's 11 apps on this list. There's probably about a similar number that are in the works in various stages. So, I would expect this, I would expect this number to double within the next few months and then hopefully double again in the next few months after that. So really like you want to be paying attention to what's happening with BrightID, and you want to be paying attention to the new things that you'll be able to do with it, because a bunch of stuff is coming out in the near future. So it's a great time to bring like more real people into BrightID that you actually know, get them using stuff, and hopefully some apps will come out that really we just want more and more apps to come out so that there's something for everybody, that
Mhm.
everybody can find a reason to use BrightID. Okay, so I'm
We
just
have
looking
a
at questions here.
yeah, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. We have an interesting question from Han. He's asking, what apps have brought in the most verifications apart from connection parties that we hold ourselves? Is there a way to figure that out?
I would say that it's going to be either Figment Learn or Rabbit Hole, because
Hmm.
they stepped up and created their own communities. And yes, the way you would figure that out is by going back to the seeds and looking at their seed groups and seeing how many people they're bringing in. At some point, Figment Learn was bringing in quite a few new users through their own community. So that's better. To me, I think that's better than sending them to a connection party. But a lot of them, like OneHive and Gitcoin, like we suggested that, and maybe they thought that that was cool, but they didn't actually go through with it yet. Like create like a meeting place where you can like come and meet other users of the application, and maybe have a better chance of actually knowing someone and having a history. And so that's nice when they do that. But the okay, so the funny thing is, like, we offer this kind of lowest denominator. We say, okay, you don't have to do any work, we'll do the work for you. You can send some people over to our connection party, they'll make some connections, they'll get verified with this lowest level. And um, you both users and apps kind of, and understandably, they take the like the quickest, like easiest path. Like that's just human nature, and it makes sense because people don't want to, if especially if it's something new, they don't want to invest too much time until they're sure about it. But I hope that we can like move a bunch of apps into the next level, which is requiring a little more out of their users, and maybe doing a little more for their users, participating a little more in this. And I think it'll happen. Some apps are doing it already. I think apps will do it more and more. And yeah, like I said, ideally, it should just be connecting to the people that you already know and getting verified that way. That should be enough. Okay.
Do you
So
think, and I'm just exploring this idea right now, that maybe a way of decentralizing these seeds and the connection parties, maybe a step towards that would be requiring users to join connection parties that are held by applications and projects. Uh, because in those communities, people know each other a step further than just BrightID, because all these people are people that are interested in using this project. They have something in common more than that, and it's kind of a yeah, I think that having connection parties on the app side, I know it's a burden on them. I know they have to like host frequent calls and stuff, but they seem to be more meaningful connections than just connection parties on BrightID.
So I think what we did with our connection parties is we learned a lot. We kind of set the stage. We figured out like what someone would need to do to have a virtual connection party. So we solved a bunch of things like that. And now I think we're getting, I think we need to go into the next phase, which is we just get rid of the connection parties that are by time and language, and instead something that's more like more personalized. And you've got to find something like you've got to find something that is like because we've got to wean people off of these catch-all like parties where you go and you don't know anyone, and move them towards like you've got to at least make some sort of effort to join a community, and hopefully there can be more and more communities, so it's already like it should be that it's already a community that you already know or have already joined. But at least like maybe an intermediate step is there's a bunch of really interesting communities in a bunch of different languages, and you can at least find something that at least somewhat interests you, or you can go learn about it or whatever, go meet some people, and then you're making a better connection. It's not just like a one and done, like I'm coming to this party and I'm gonna leave. And it's like you get to know people. It actually feels like a social connection. Because we need a better graph. Like we need yeah, I mean, we just need Bright ID to become what it was meant to be. And I think we'll get there. I'm not disappointed with what we've done with the connection parties, because we learned a lot about what it means to make a group connection, and something like things like that. Um, but yeah, I think we're gonna have to move out of that phase. So I thank you. Having said that, I think the Bright ID stars are now going to be like, I don't know, maybe community mentors rather than like Zoom call leaders or whatever. It'll be more like, okay, let me show you how to make a community. And here's our guidebook, here's our playbook, and let me come visit your community while it's still growing, and make sure that help you make sure that you're doing the best practices like for a community. I think that that's more how it should be. What do you think? As our most prolific star, what do you
I
think?
was I was imagining how we could take how we could have taken another route where we would force the different projects and applications to have their own connection parties, uh, which has its disadvantages. Of course, it's easier for them to know that there's a connection party happening on BrightID, asking users, give them a link, go join a connection party. But we could like mandate them to have their own connection parties, and then we would have our ambassadors or BrightID stars to join those calls to facilitate that connection party that is happening in that community.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I think it'll turn out sort of like kind of how we talked about the sponsorship model, where some apps just for whatever reason, because they
hmm,
either technically can't figure out how to do it or they don't have the money or whatever, they're not engaged in sponsoring, and so they send people to other apps. It could be the same with the connection parties. Maybe they just don't have a community, they don't have the bandwidth. I remember there when we sent you out at the beginning to talk to different apps and like talk about and to like see if we could make seed groups. I remember there was at least one. I think what was the one that you went to is like some really like privacy,
uh,
like anonymous focused thing.
I think it was Tron. I think so.
No, no, it
Was it?
was no, it was the what's the Ethereum based like mixer, like the privacy mixer on Ethereum that allows people to like have
Tornado Cash.
Tornado Cash.
Tornado Cash. That's the
Yeah.
one.
So
That's
you
the
went
one. Yeah.
you, you went to Tornado Cash, and they're
They
like,
were
dude,
super harsh.
we don't even like we're all pseudonymous people. Like we don't even share our identities with each other. And you're asking us to like host a connection party where
Yeah.
people come and like get to know each other and have this get to know each other session. And they're like, no, that's not what we're about. And so like there's definitely cases where it's not like there's some apps where it's just either there is no community or there's just some other reason where it's just not that's just not going to be their thing. And so that's fine. And there should be other communities, but there's definitely some apps that are more social. Like I would say Gitcoin, at least, I mean, there's definitely some social aspects to it. And
Yes.
something like that could definitely have a social side to it. So yeah, I mean, there should be enough options for people. So we should definitely, I think one of the things we've learned that's really important is we've learned kind of the playbook for how to host a successful connection party. And so we know how to do that now. We've learned how to do that. So now we can make recommendations. We've also made some steps in streamlining what it takes
Hmm.
to register a seed DAO. Now there's a form that you can fill out and you can request to become a seed community. And we know what questions we want to ask and they're in the form. And we know like the audit process for like going and checking out the community. So we've learned a bunch in the last 9 months or whatever since we launched our connection party craziness, which like was just it was not planned. In case anyone wants to know, like we had certain ideas of what we thought BrightID was gonna how it was gonna grow and stuff, and we just kind of threw that out the window and just kind of adapted and did something different because we found that users feedback and user reaction was way different than what we expected. And like we didn't, I guess we got a lesson in human nature and we realized, okay, like people want steps, they want to like follow the steps, they want instant gratification. They're not like here to like learn and like fiddle around and like play with BrightID and like they're not they're not there for the same reasons that we as the creators of BrightID are there. They have certain goals that they want to do, and so we learned a lot about that. Um, and so now I think we can go back to our original goals, being a little smarter about how we do it, and take some lessons learned, and hopefully still become the BrightID that we always wanted to be, not like some cheapened version of it. So yeah.
I think one of the, and
Have any other
I
questions?
know that we're running out of the time. We're already an hour in. I think one of the steps that I think Figma Learn took, which was having a connection party on BrightID side, and then asking users to join their community and make a connection to their seed group as
You a
well on
higher
top of that.
verification. They give you a higher verification level if you join theirs.
Uh-huh. So
Like
something like that would be, I think would be interesting for projects and be more meaningful BrightID as well, because now users are like Sybils and like attackers and people who don't know anything about BrightID are filtered out through the connection parties or the onboarding sessions if we rebrand it, and then go to that connection party. They already know BrightID. They just want to make a connection to people that they have more in common with, and
yeah,
then get verified for that application. Maybe that's another approach that we want to make.
yeah, and I think that that's kind of where apps are at now. That you could offer them a leveled approach, kind of like how Gitcoin has. Like they don't make it a requirement to do BrightID, but you get a bonus. So you could offer different levels of bonuses. So like Gitcoin could say, okay, you get a 20% bonus if you do the lowest level of BrightID. If you do the higher level of BrightID, you get a 50% bonus. And that one requires you to actually know some people to find like to find a real community, not just like a pop-up connection party. Um, and and I think that that's appropriate, and that's where apps are now, because it is kind of a risk to be the first app that says, okay, we're going to do this process that no other app is doing, and we're going to like require our users to go through it, and we don't know what the success rate might be, and it might end up being this bigger barrier, like a huge disappointment to users. They become really disgruntled, because that's why we made the switch, if you recall, with BrightID, is like users were getting really upset. They're like, Like, what is this stupid BrightID thing? Like, I can't get verified. This is way too hard. I just want to get my thing and be done with it. Like, why are you making me do all this stuff? And it
Mhm.
was creating like a really negative experience. So we kind of have to meet people where they're at. We have to meet apps where they're at. And I think we have a better idea of how to do that now. And we can still move in the right direction.
Uh,
Do we have
so
any
I
questions we should answer?
don't know if you have something that we had some suggestions that was interesting,
Okay.
like users of anonymous apps, like what we discussed. Their users can become BrightID verified through other applications or connections, and then anonymously provide their BrightID verification without disclosing personal info, which is what's happening right now. That's what BrightID is doing. And I'm not seeing questions per se. There was a question which made me wonder, like I didn't fully understand it. It says,
No question, and the answer is yes to that one. Yes, it's anonymous.
yes.
Use of anonymous apps.
Susanna asked, uh, she says, I asked some time ago and I understood that BrightID app is just an example. I
That's
think
true.
that is, yeah, what Philip said. A project can build their own app, and then her question is, are all these apps requiring the user to have the two apps? I'm guessing that
So,
she
so
means
here's the
Bright
thing,
ID app and that app.
right? So
That, yeah.
Oh yeah, so that's a that so we tried there's been a few times where apps are like, hey, we want to use BrightID, but we don't want users to have to install BrightID. Like we don't want them to have to install another application. And so we tried to help them go down that route, and we have an API that would allow them to do all of that. So the capabilities exist, but we found that apps run into a problem, which is um, kind of this silo effect where Bright ID does not want people to create Sybils, but if you have these apps that don't know about each other and they're all using Bright ID in kind of this behind the scenes way, then if a user signs up for apps A, B, C, and D that are all doing it that way, they're not going to have any like, especially if they don't know that Bright ID even exists, they're not going to know that they have 4 BrightID accounts, and they're not going to know that they're not linked in any way. And when they get verified, like whatever activities they do to verify, it would have to be self-contained within that app, like within the social system of that app, because getting verified on app A would not get you verified on app B, even if you're making social connections and stuff like that. And ideally, I think you want a situation where if someone, let's say that there's like some social interactions in Gitcoin that allow someone to get verified just by using Gitcoin. They don't have to use the BrightID app. Um, and then so they do that. They have to go back to app A and do something else, like do some other interactions there. I think that should transfer over to different apps. Like you shouldn't have to repeat the work, and you certainly shouldn't have to have multiple BrightID. So because of that, um, it was difficult because you can't hide, it becomes difficult to hide the fact that a user is using BrightID. Like you kind of have to let them know that they're using BrightID. And then you have to let them know that their actions in one app transfer over to actions to like results in another app. And that they're all linked together in some way. All their BrightID accounts should be linked together in some way. And they should be able to manage those links. So if they say something like, hey, um, I want to break my link off with this app, and I don't want them to like know anything about me anymore, or use this BrightID anymore. Then they should be able to manage things like that, kind of in a, I guess, from their perspective, a centralized way, where they have like a control center that controls all the apps that they're using, controls their keys for making connection, and those sorts of things. So anyways, I that's so that is that is a struggle. I would love to solve this problem, and I think it's a great goal for BrightID to kind of exist in the background, and people don't even have to know that they're using it. They're naturally making social connections. They don't have to download a separate app. So yeah, please help. If you know how to solve that problem, please help us. We haven't cracked that one yet.
Yeah, I actually do not know, of course, but from my app that I'm building, it would be really, it really be impossible to ask the people to download two apps because it's financial inclusion. So it's like it's difficult to download one app, and two apps. It's like, for my case, perhaps in other case, because when you are dealing with financial inclusion, it's people do not want to waste the space of their phone. It's very difficult to them to use different apps for the same thing. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so I think maybe a bad solution is just to wait for everyone to already be using BrightID. And then it becomes easy. If everyone's already using BrightID, it's no problem, because you just say, oh, this thing that you're probably already using anyway, just link it up to our app. When we're in a state where almost everyone is new to BrightID, you obviously can't do that. And then it's like, you could start people on the path of BrightID if there was like some way to make those connections within the app that they're already using. But then the question is like, at what point do you, I guess at some point they need to figure out that they're using BrightID, and at some point they need to be able to like export that profile that they've created in this other app, export it and link it to their other BrightID, like their main BrightID control center at some point when they start using other BrightID apps. So that's the tricky part, that we haven't like figured out a real smooth way to do that yet.
Thanks.
And oh, Susanna, you make up. I wanted to. I was imagining if more apps are having a cell phone based or mobile based version, maybe they could like can they have a tab? And I think Michael would know if that's possible or not. Like if I have my own app, my own project with this mobile app version, and then there's a tab of BrightID that I click on it inside my own app, and then there are BrightID tools on it that I can make a connection on BrightID, scan a QR code or send a link. Is that something that would be possible?
Yeah.
We make a BrightID SDK.
Well, yeah, there already are BrightID SDKs, but I think what Paslar just described is a really cool idea, that there's like the BrightID, what we now call the reference app, just becomes like your BrightID manager. So imagine in the future that there's an app called BrightID Manager, and you can start using BrightID without even having a BrightID manager. So let's say that you're using Susanna's financial inclusion app, and it's got BrightID, it's using BrightID, but you just, if that's your first time using BrightID, you just get to start using it. You don't have to download another app, and you just you're just kind of doing everything naturally with one app. And then when later on, when you download another app or you download BrightID Manager, I think there could be maybe a decentralized registry or something that knows these are all the apps that are that use BrightID, and so it could sort of detect like which apps do you have installed, and then it could realize that, okay, all those apps are using BrightID. Let's make sure that you're using the same BrightID with all those apps. And I think definitely when we start talking about like a mobile centric, like using it all on the same mobile device, it becomes much easier to do that, because you can kind of detect what apps are installed, and you can like just manage it that way. And so you could even imagine like a BrightID Manager SDK that kind of lives in all the different apps, so that if you use Susanna's app, it could at some point it could say, oh, we just detected that you installed this other app that uses BrightID. Would you like to link your BrightID from the financial inclusion app to this other app. And then you don't even need to have the BrightID manager installed. It's just kind of like this library that then does the linking. So yeah, I mean, I like that. I like where this idea is going of using like the single mobile device to act as kind of like a like a hub for all your different BrightID applications. But don't forget that idea, Postler. That was a good one.
Oh, sure. I don't know if there is anything that you want to talk about. Susanna was, I think I heard her voice when I started talking. Please go on.
No, I have other question, please.
Sure.
So, are you intending to issue some kind of credential, like with a number, with like following the verifiable credential model, something like that, that perhaps we can like export, not in using BrightID at all, but at least like exporting that and using in other contexts?
Absolutely. So having talked to people from the verifiable credential working group, what we think the best plan is that BrightID nodes, they would each have decentralized IDs, and then they would sign verifiable credentials. So one of the right now we kind of have this custom credential that gets returned from BrightID nodes that then users can manage in a self-sovereign way, but it doesn't follow the VC, the verifiable credential standard. So I think we just take that existing kind of flow that we're already using and just conform to the standards. Because right now, when you get a credential back from a BrightID node, there's one that's just like the JSON unsigned. You trust it because you just got it back and you're the requester, not the subject, and because of that you trust it that way. And then there's two other methods that use that allow the subject to act as an intermediary, and one of them is signing using some like EDDSA signing keys, and the other one is using Ethereum compatible signatures, so that you can then upload it into a smart contract and have the smart contract verify the signature. So we're already using that. There's a bunch of different applications that are already using this smart contract based verification. So you have a completely decentralized app, and the user says, okay, I want to prove to this decentralized app that I'm verified. I get this signed credential from the node, and then I submit it, and it's done through like the front end, so the client of the like the website usually. So they go to the website. The website will, when they link their BrightID, it will pull on their behalf this credential, and then the front end uploads it to the smart contract, and the smart contract checks the signatures. So that's what we have right now. So it wouldn't be too much of a stretch just to add another option to that says get the credential in like verifiable credential format. So we would just need to I guess the only reason we haven't done it yet is we haven't had an app that has wanted to do that. As soon as there's an app that wants to do that, then we say, okay, let's do it. Let's work together to add that option to the API so that you can get back a real verifiable credential and it can fit the specification that you want.
So the idea that is that instead of integrating like online, you could generate like an offline certificate that I can import and say that that's what BrightID, that's the average, that's the grade that a BrightID is giving to you as a unique person, like from 0 to 10, something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And okay. And that works really well with our blind signature upgrade that we're doing right now. So what we actually can do, which is even more privacy preserving, is we can have the nodes sign that sign that credential in a blinded way so that they don't know any kind of identifier at all from the application. So in other words, I can share my username or unique identifier in an app, have a node blindly sign a credential for me, and then get to that back and share that back with the app to prove that I was verified by a node. And then these signatures should expire. That's kind of the recommendation, is you don't want a BrightID verification to last forever. So I think the simplest way that we've thought of is they just expire. So you have to go back and get a new credential, however often the app feels that you should. But that whole process should be able to be automated by the client, so that the user doesn't even, maybe doesn't even have to know that it's happening. Their client is just going and getting the credential for them, and then sending it back to the requesting application.
Okay, great. So the app will go to an API, something like that, and take the certificate. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I would say we're already most of the way there. We just need to make sure that we conform with the type of verification that the apps want. And so I think I really like the verifiable credential standard, and I'm happy to support that one.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, cool. And I want to thank everyone for being here. It was about the statistics, but I think we spent the least amount of time on the boring statistics topic, which is fine. But yeah, thank you for being here. I'm gonna conclude our session and stop recording now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And especially Adam, because he took all the efforts in this call, and I know he's already tired. He's been in all calls. Stopping recording now. The lady is gonna tell you.